Hello guys, hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to be talking about Battlefield 5 upgrades and more specifically weapon upgrades. I've mentioned the current BF5 system in previous videos briefly, but I think that this is a topic that needs a bit more discussion because it's so fundamental to the overall gunplay, progression and gameplay in the game. Before we talk about what we think can be improved, first we can take a look at the current system. Right now every weapon has an upgrade tree of sorts. Play with the base weapon and you'll level it up over time. And when you reach certain levels, you're able to then buy upgrades for that weapon with a currency that you get from playing the game, doing assignments among other things. Weapon upgrades depend on the current weapon that you're upgrading, so the upgrades for the STG will be quite different from those of the Kar98 for example, but it will have some similarities. Usually the first one is a faster aim down the sight speed. Let's use the STG as an example, and this has got 9 upgrade options split over 2 paths of the skill tree. Technically there are 3 paths, but the first few upgrades are mandatory and you've got no choice over them. The 9 upgrades are quick aim, fast bullets, I feel like something got lost in translation there, more accurate hipfire, improved stationary accuracy, quick deploy, less horizontal recoil, faster movement while aiming, less vertical recoil, and finally improved moving accuracy. Now you can't have all 9 of these upgrades at once. In fact, you can only have a maximum of 5. You get to either choose the left hand path, which for the most part gives you better hipfire and lower vertical recoil, or you can choose the right hand path, which gives you improved stationary accuracy and less horizontal recoil. This of course is just one weapon as an example, the STG. So what's the problem with this system? Is there even a problem there? Well, at its core, I don't think that having a skill tree is the main problem. However, I have to admit that other players would perhaps prefer a more visual approach to upgrades on a weapon, but instead what DICE have done here is separate the visual stuff entirely from the gameplay stuff, apart from the scopes. Now there are positives and negatives to that, and I think we've also got to take into account that during the Second World War, I imagine that weapon upgrades like we're used to in games like BF3 and BF4 didn't exist, at least in that sort of form. I'm sure that weapons were modified, but was it done enough to have an entire customization system built on it? I'm not so sure. Gameplay and visual are separate, that's the way DICE have gone with it, we've got to live with that. So this skill tree then, let's work with that. The main problem is actually a pretty obvious one when you think about it, and it's in the name. Weapon upgrades. The options are direct improvements and upgrades to your weapon. There are no side grades, no negatives, nothing like that in fact. If it says you get faster aim down the sight or faster bullets, then that's exactly what you'll get. If it says you get better hipfire, you don't get, say, slower aim down the sight speed as a disadvantage or a trade-off there. Nope. Straight upgrades, weapon upgrades. This of course brings with it a few issues. First of all, the weapons are already pretty good without any upgrades at all, as we found out during the first and second alpha, because back then in those builds of the game, the upgrade system wasn't available for us to play with. Weapons in the alpha seemed skillful and you could learn the spray pattern of the STG or the bullet drop of the Kar98 by simply playing and practicing. And then in the beta, when upgrades got involved, they make the weapons considerably easier to use with 0 downsides. That's the problem. When you put attachments on your weapon in previous Battlefield games, say BF4, each attachment was designed for a certain purpose. For example, the angled grip gave you better first shot accuracy, but a slower spread decrease as a result. The compensator gave you less horizontal recoil, but more spread per shot. There were upsides and downsides. You could pick attachments that fit with your playstyle, knowing that you'd be better in some circumstances but worse in others. With the current BF5 system that was in the open beta, you can upgrade your hipfire and yet still be just as good at the distance shooting. Certainly not any worse than you were before. So all you're doing is simply making your weapon significantly better the longer you play with it. And this is bad for a couple of reasons. I think one of the main reasons is that if you've played the game for longer, your gun is going to be much better than a person who's just jumping in. Time equals direct power in that circumstance. Now with the sniper rifles, you also have the option to increase bullet velocity to help you better deal with bullet drop. And you even had an option to equip a bayonet in the upgrade section. So if you've got an upgraded sniper rifle, just because you've been playing with it for longer, it's going to be significantly better and easier to aim with, and hit targets that are moving and far away at distance. Okay, so DICE are listening to the feedback on this, and during the developer Twitter takeover, Drunksy did suggest that this system was easier to balance, but that they wouldn't be against making changes to it if that was necessary. But of course, making these changes isn't just a simple job of flicking one switch or changing a couple of values. There's all sorts of systems tied to the weapon upgrades. Now, my personal opinion is that you've got to have downsides to each upgrade, and they've got to be meaningful, and they should help you better distinguish the role that you're going to go with on that particular weapon. It's possible that 2 paths on this skill tree just aren't enough, because at its basic level, you're picking between hipfire and aim down the sight accuracy on most of the weapons. So what is the solution? Is there one? Well, I don't think any of us have all of the answers, and I've got no doubt that the system is already being looked at internally and changed to see how it can be tweaked and improved. After all, this is the first time everyone has got their hands on the game in open beta, so I expect that DICE have now got a lot of data to sift through. But I do think that it's too late in the game to have a visual upgrade system, and it's certainly too late to change up the upgrade system entirely. So the first step, at least in my mind, is to have negative aspects to each of the upgrades. I'm not saying that's as simple as it sounds, but I think you need some side grades or negatives to your upgrade, and they've got to be meaningful, otherwise what's the point? Perhaps if DICE didn't want each upgrade to have a negative side effect, then those could be reserved for the absolute strongest upgrades, the ones that are furthest down the tree. That in itself would be a simple improvement. And if we keep using the STG as our reference, mainly because it's available straight away, and I think most players would play as Assault using this rifle in the beginning, so using that as a base, I'd really be interested to hear what upgrade path most people went with in the open beta. Was it right or left? I reckon that most people went right. It'd be cool to see if there are some stats from DICE on that. I think that there are other problems with the upgrade system too. I know that players are frustrated that you can't upgrade when you're in the game. You've got to go back to the menu in your company, and that was really frustrating in the beta, but thankfully DICE are already aware of this, and they are looking at implementing a system that will allow players to upgrade their weapons in game. That will be a huge change. My other problem is the way that the upgrades are applied. When you pick certain upgrades for your weapon, you're stuck with those upgrades. It's not a case at the moment of being able to buy an upgrade on a different path and then change it down the line or backtrack. Once you've done it, it seems to be set in stone, and in the open beta, the only way to change that particular weapon up was to get a new version of the weapon from your armory and buy all of the upgrades again, choosing different ones. I really don't think this is a very efficient system, and I'd prefer it to change. It's so frustrating doing some things in your armory and some in your company. I think they need to kind of merge together, but also you're going to end up with multiple identical weapons with slightly different upgrades. What if you just wanted to change one of the upgrades? Nope, at the moment not possible. You'd need an entirely new weapon, and you'd have to use all of your earned currency to level it up again. I feel that if you've bought an upgrade once, then you should be able to apply it to another variant of the same weapon for free. Let's not forget that the currency you use to buy upgrades is also to get cosmetic items, so you're going to go through that really fast. I just don't want this to turn into a situation where if you want a new version of a weapon, you've got to spend real money to buy it. I think that would be terrible for the game. Wrapping things up, one of the things that I really didn't like about BF1 was the variant system. I just disliked having multiple versions of the same weapon. I wanted a system where I could just take, say, the bar and tweak it to how I wanted it, and if I died and thought, you know what, I'd like to have a longer range scope this time, then I could do it. Or if I wanted a more suppressive version of my weapon rather than one with better hipfire because maybe I want to sit further back, then I could do it. Sadly, this system is leaning more towards those variants, but just variants that I need to change myself, and if you haven't spent the currency on it, then you can't have it. At least one saving grace is that the scopes for the weapon can be attached via the visual customization, so you do at least get to change those on the fly. Finally, I don't think the entire weapon customization system in BF5 is beyond saving. I can see what DICE were trying to achieve with this, but I think it needs some refinement, and hopefully between now and the new release date a few things can be changed. I think some refinement to the purchasing system and the ability to buy a second version of the weapon from that screen would help. When it comes to the upgrades, there needs to be a reason to choose one path over another. There has to be some negatives to those upgrades, and I really hope that they add some in, and they need to make these meaningful and impactful, otherwise what's the point of having them? And that's my take on it, guys. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. How could they improve the weapon upgrade system in BF5? If you enjoyed the video, give me a like. If you didn't, a dislike. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.